Welcome to the Just As I Am podcast. It's your host, as usual, Nicole, and I want you to get ready to part the Red Sea with me. Today, we're going to be talking about Moses. So Moses is probably one of the biggest characters or people that we know in the Bible for many reasons. And this is perfect timing, I feel like, because I won't say obsessed with Moses right now, but we are going over Moses in my Sunday school class. And last week we went over, the birth of Moses. And this week we went over the burning bush. And next week we're going to go over the plagues. So there's that, and the fact that I don't know if y'all have seen it, but there is a new documentary series on Netflix about Moses. And I've watched it, and I'm probably going to watch it again. I really loved it. I think that it was really awesome. I'm a weirdo. I do love a good documentary, and I think it just started within the past year. Honestly, I don't know. But I love documentaries because you get the representation of whatever, I guess, and then you get all sorts of people bringing their information together and explaining what's happening even further. And I just love knowledge, I guess, and I love history. I love old things. They're my favorite. So I chose Moses, and Moses covers a whole chunk, a really large chunk of the Old Testament. Definitely all of Exodus, and then I believe he goes through Numbers and Deuteronomy. The man lived a really long time, and he did a whole lot. And he wrote Exodus, by the way, so there's that for you. But I wanted to share with you the intro, a little background to Exodus before we get into it. But I'm not going over all of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, so you can breathe a little bit. We won't be here all day long, but I will be going over Exodus 1 through 20. So Exodus chapters 1 through 20. And as usual, I'm in CSB. So if y'all want to tag along, great. Get your Bibles out. Let's go. So our first hint about the book of Exodus comes from its title. It's derived from the Greek word meaning departure. True to its name, Exodus is centered on the departure of God's people from Egypt, where they were held as slaves to Pharaoh. The date of Exodus itself is disputed, but biblical evidence favors about 1446 BC. 1 Kings 6:1 tells us that Exodus occurred 480 years before Solomon's fourth year as king, which was likely about 966 BC. In Judges 11:26, Jephthah, said Israel had been living in regions of Palestine for 300 years. He lived around 1100 BC, which dates the end of the wilderness journey around 1400 BC. Last year, we did a women's Bible study. I can't remember who it's by. I'm so sorry. But it was entitled In the Wilderness. And it was about the Israelites in the wilderness. So I don't think it covered them leaving Egypt. But if I can remember correctly, it was once they had gotten past the Red Sea into freedom and all that stuff. It was a very good Bible study. So into the wilderness, look that up. Go ahead and do that Bible study so you can learn even more about the Israelites and this situation. It'll be awesome. So Exodus 1:1 starts off, Exodus chapter 1 starts off talking about how Joseph and his generation have all passed away. Hopefully you know who Joseph is. If you don't, we can talk about him another time because Joseph is a pretty important character as well. Why do I keep calling them characters? They're people. You know who I mean. But him and his generation have all passed away, but the Hebrew and Israelite people were incredibly fruitful and large in numbers, which means they multiplied a bunch. Now, a new king, or a new pharaoh, has taken over Egypt and decides that they need to do something about these people so that they don't take over or whatever, outrank them, outrule them, And he assigns taskmasters over the Israelites and oppressed them with very harsh labor. So, taskmasters is what my Bible says. Other versions might say something differently, but basically, taskmasters made sure that they did whatever, but they were very brutal towards the Israelites. But no matter how harsh the labor was, they still continued to multiply and to grow. So the king has now brought the Hebrew midwives into the picture, okay? And I didn't write down their names, but there was 2 of them, and the Bible mentions their names, okay? And I believe Pua was one of them, but I can't remember the other one's name. And he brings them in, and he's like, hey, if you're helping some of these Hebrew Israelite women deliver their babies and you see that it's a boy, take care of it. Get rid of it. We can't have that, right? Well, these special ladies feared God and knew that that was not right. So they did not follow through with the command, and they kind of weaseled their way out of trouble. And they said something along the lines of, these Hebrew women are just more strong than the Egyptian women, and, they have their babies before we even make it to their homes to help, or something along the lines of that. And because of this, God was very blessing. He was very grateful, and he rewarded these 2 ladies for their families to grow. And so at this time, Moses' mother delivers Moses and sees that he is beautiful, as every mother hopefully sees their baby as, and hides him for 3 months. Sometimes I feel like you can't even hide babies for 3 minutes, and she hid him for 3 months. And once she felt she could no longer hide him, or it was getting harder to hide him, she got a papyrus basket, and she basically waterproofed it. So she put pitch and all that stuff on it. And she set him in the reeds of the Nile. And I keep meaning to look up pictures of the Nile, but every time I do see pictures of the Nile, that thing is huge. Not just in length, but in width as well. So I would have been terrified, honestly, putting my little baby in there. But Moses' sister watches after him, okay, and sees Pharaoh's daughter going down to the Nile to bathe. So Pharaoh's daughter grabs up Moses, sees that he is a Hebrew, okay, and she's like, whoa, this is a Hebrew baby. So then Moses' sister kind of comes out of the shadows, sneaky Pete, and she goes up to Pharaoh's daughter and says, hey, do you want me to go get somebody who can take care of this baby? Somebody who can, nurse him? Because I can do that. I know exactly the person, right? And of course, she responds, yes. And guess who? The sister goes and chooses to take care of Moses, his mother. And not only did his own mother get to take care of him, but she got paid for it. Okay, moms, raise your hand if you would love that aspect to be brought into motherhood. So once he grew older, he went back to Pharaoh's daughter, and she named him Moses. And this is where the title of this episode comes from, because I'm sure you probably saw it and you were like, oh, Jesus is getting baptized. At least that's what I thought when I came up with it, even though I knew what I was talking about. But Moses means to be drawn out or pulled out of the water, okay? Because that's exactly, what she did. She pulled him right out of the Nile. So time passes, and Moses goes out to be with his people. He goes out to be with the Israelites, to be with the Hebrews, and he watches them, labor and get whipped and beaten and just all this awful treatment. He then saw a taskmaster strike someone, and when no one was looking, he went and killed that taskmaster and then hid him in the sand. So automatically, we know Moses knows this isn't right. He let his feelings get in the way. And the next day, Moses realizes that he's actually been found out, because he saw two Israelites fighting, and he went and told them, why are you fighting your own people? And then one was like, well, are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? So when Pharaoh heard this, he wanted Moses dead. Okay? But by the time that he was going to go after Moses, or, get somebody to do his dirty work, Moses had already fled. He had already run away. He ended up in the land of Midian. Okay? Good distance, right? So, ending up at this well, he actually helped 7 sisters from some shepherds. They were trying to get water for, I believe, their stock or plants, just whatever they needed water for. And these shepherds were being jerks, and they came over and were trying to run the sisters off. Well, Moses was like, So he goes over and helps the sisters run the shepherds off and helps them get water for their stock and, all that stuff. And because of this, they went home and they told their dad about it. And their dad was like, well, where is he? So they went and they brought him home. And their dad actually gave Zipporah to Moses to marry, right? Man, that's a reward. So they actually had a son and named him Gershom, right? Because he was a resident alien in a foreign land. Moses, that is. Well, the Pharaoh has died at this point, but the Israelites are still slaves. So, like we all do, or we should, they cry out to God, and he hears them. While taking care of the sheep, Moses came across a burning bush. And as he gets closer, he realizes that it's on fire, but it's not being consumed. It's not burning up. And when God sees that Moses has come closer, he says, Moses, Moses. And Moses answered, here I am. So Exodus 3:5 tells us, do not come closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place you are standing is holy ground. And the funny part about this, it's not really funny. Okay, let me tell the story. So when we went over this Sunday, I got the Bible study. What is it, by Sunday? And by Zach Wendell. And, we've made it to the burning bush. And I've been working with, my kiddos on being able to look stuff up in the Bible. So I got one of them to look it up, and we were reading, she read it, and then I was like, that is not right. That doesn't match what's in my book. And lo and behold, I love this Bible study. I'm just teasing. But if you're listening, the Bible study, Zach Wendell, your burning bush chapter section, okay, says Genesis instead of Exodus. And so we were looking at Genesis 3:5, and we were like, that is not right. Because it's Exodus. But we still love it. Everything else looked right when I flipped through some more, but just a little laugh right there. But when this happened, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Honestly, I would be terrified. Maybe terrified in a good way. Like, I wouldn't know what to do. Because I feel like anything I would do would just be wrong. You know what I'm saying? But God explains that his people are suffering and tired, and that he wants Moses to go set them free. As any of us would, Moses is very confused. He's uncertain. He's baffled. He tells him, who am I to go and do that? And God says, I will be with you. I am going to give you a sign. So Moses asked God, what am I going to tell them so they know that I was sent by you? He's like, what do I call you? And God tells him, I am who I am. That's all he says. That's all he needs to know. He also tells Moses that Pharaoh will not let them free, but he will stretch out his hand. Then Pharaoh will let them go. So Moses is still uncertain that he can convince anyone that God allows Moses to perform miracles mainly with his staff. Staff and, just mainly. Like, the staff is a significant thing in the Bible, right? But most of them were performed with his staff, sometimes with other things in other ways. Some of the miracles were, if you threw a staff down, it would become a snake, and then he would just pick it up by its tail. Putting his hand into his cloak or robe and pulling it out and having leprosy all over it. And being able to turn the water from the Nile into blood. So all of these people who wanted to kill Moses are actually gone. So he gathers his family and he goes to Egypt. They all make it to Egypt, and Moses reunites with Aaron, his brother. So, with his brother, Moses went to confront Pharaoh and tell him to let their people go. Pharaoh says, who is God that I should listen? No. Pharaoh then made their work even harder. So Moses goes back to God and is asking, why have you done this? And God tells him now he will see what I will do. So God tells Moses what to tell Pharaoh, but Moses responds, how can I when I am such a poor speaker? And God tells him to take Aaron with him. This can be taken a few different ways. Some people might say or assume or research and come to the conclusion that Moses might have had a stuttering problem, or, some people just aren't natural speakers. They're not able to just talk and be fully understood and be able to get their message across, how the audience can receive it. So God tells him to take Aaron, right? Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83 at this time. I was flabbergasted when I read that. Hey, let's get this going at 80 years old, right? Good gravy. Nowadays people are retiring, but okay. I mean, if you say so. They go and perform these miracles. Moses threw his staff down and it turned into the snake. Well, back then they had sorcerers, magicians, whatever. The Bible says a few different things. And they did the same thing. They threw their staffs down and they turned into snakes. Well, Moses' staff, or his snake, swallowed the magician's serpent's whole. Okay. I mean, that'll show you. So, time is continuing, and Pharaoh is just refusing. He's not going to let them go for anything. And so now the 10 plagues happen, okay? And they get worse and worse and worse and worse. So we start with, water turned into blood. So the Nile being turned into blood. Their main water supply, okay? Remember that. Frogs. Frogs everywhere. I love frogs. But the amount of frogs that were here in this moment, I don't think I would like that. And then gnats, we all don't like those. And then swarm of flies, definitely don't like those. Death of livestock, that would just make me sad. I mean, livestock was a definite necessity. It was a definite aid to living. So for that to happen was definite devastation, but the animals didn't do nothing. And then you have boils, which were painful. You had hail the size of probably baseballs, I think. And it only hailed over Egypt. It didn't hail where the Israelites were. So they were unaffected completely. And this hail was so massive that it really caused a lot of harm and damage. Then we have locusts, okay? Locusts are kind of like goats of the bug world, you could say. They eat any and everything. So these locusts came in and ate every single living plant organism, I guess you could say. The green from the trees, all of their wheat, everything, left nothing unturned. And then we have the last and the most devastating, harmful, worst, whatever you want to call it. We have the death of the firstborn. So with the last plague came a whole slew of instructions. And these instructions were basically definitely for the Israelites, but I mean, honestly, to anybody who would listen, I feel like. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, So these instructions ran from how to prepare the meal for Passover, what to do with the leftovers, and everything in between. So this is the biggest one yet and the most costly. If they followed exactly, they would be spared, but if not, their firstborn male would die. Now, with losing his son, because did Pharaoh follow the rules? No. He lost his son, so now Pharaoh, golly, he has to be angry, but he's so full of grief, and he's angry, and he's upset, and, he has had enough. And he told them, he said, leave. get out. So God guided them, but he did not guide the Israelites down a normal road, down a normal path. He actually took them directly to the Red Sea. Okay? And on their journey to leave, they actually fulfilled Joseph's request. Joseph's request was that they bring his bones with them. He's like, if y'all leave in Egypt, I'm leaving Egypt. I heard that, Joseph. So once he sees that they're gone, Pharaoh actually, he says, just kidding, and he pursues them. I don't know what to do about this, man. We can give him credit for being someone who just is relentless and won't give up. Definitely. So they catch up to the Israelites, and everyone starts to panic, and they're kind of getting sassy about it too. They're kind of talking, saying stuff along the lines of, well, if we were gonna die, why did we have to come all the way over here to do it? Rude. So Moses holds strong, and he reminds them, hey, God's got this. Okay? At this moment, Moses listens to God, and he uses his staff to part the Red Sea, right? And they begin to cross. So, seeing that the Israelites began to cross, the Egyptians began to follow. And once all of the Israelites crossed, Moses used his staff and, I guess you could say, released the Red Sea. He let go of his hold, however you want to visualize that. And it crushed every single Egyptian. Nobody made it out. And there were 6,000 Egyptians. Okay? Like Pharaoh didn't just get a quick gang. He didn't get, 20 or 30 of them. He got 6,000. I mean, thinking about this, you're just like, was that a smart move? I mean, in the end, no, not at all whatsoever. But come on, Pharaoh. So this was a point where the Israelites really began to fear and believe in God. Once they crossed and they realized they were safe, they all sang a song together. And it was a very long song, which you can find in Exodus, I believe chapter 16, perhaps. So, trying and panicking about how they're going to survive, God provides water and manna for them. And if you don't know what manna is, I guess you could say, a type of bread or something, used to be able to make bread with. So now we're in chapter 17, and they have to fight a whole new enemy. It never ends, does it? So they actually win the enemy y'all, it's bedtime. They win this battle as long as Moses has his hands raised. So, as long as his hands are up, they're winning. And if they start coming down, things aren't going to look too good. But Moses kept his hands up, and they prevailed. So I'm actually going to end the story here, and we're going to end on the part where Moses goes up into the mountain, and he stays for about 40 days. That special number. Or one of the special numbers anyways. And he comes back down with the 10 Commandments, on the 2 big stones. So when he comes down, he actually sees the Israelites are worshiping another god and kind of loses it. He lets his temper get a hold of him again. And he throws the 10 Commandments down, and they break. So just a reminder, if you do know your 10 Commandments, And if you don't know your 10 commandments, here they are. And like I said, this is from CSB version, so they're not going to be probably exactly as you know them, but they're the same thing. They're along the same lines. So, number 1, do not have any gods before me. Number 2, do not make idols. Number 3, do not misuse the name of the Lord. Number 4, remember the Sabbath. Keep it holy. Number 5, honor your father and mother. Number 6, do not murder. Number 7, do not commit adultery. Number 8, do not steal. Number 9, do not give false testimony about your neighbor. And number 10, do not covet. So this actually terrified them, and Moses told them, it's fine, don't worry. Moses' story continues for a very long time. Like I said at the beginning, Moses was 120 when he passed away. 120. I've only heard about a few people making it to like even 110, but Moses made it to 120. And although he had a very long life, he still did not make it to the promised land. But he had such a huge hand in caring for God's people and bringing them out of Egypt to the promised land. And, you know, you think about it, about how does God use perfect people to do his work? No. The only perfect person that did that has even ever walked the planet, was his son, Jesus Christ. But one thing about Moses that's so special is him and God, I guess you could say, were incredibly close. Moses is probably, other than Jesus, obviously, one of the only ones in the Bible who had so much one-on-one with God. And it's so cool and interesting and wild. But I want to encourage you to go back, because I did not cover every single thing, or else we would have been here for 6 years. But I encourage you to go back and read the whole thing, at least, 1 through 20, chapters 1 through 20 in Exodus. Some of them are really short, so it shouldn't be too hard. Yes, there's a whole bunch of stuff you probably can't pronounce, but thank you, Google, for being able to tell us how to pronounce it. So just remember that we are not perfect, but imperfect people are who God chooses to follow his will and do what he needs or asks us to do. So, I hope this is an encouraging story and you got something out of it. And thank you so much for listening. I will catch y'all on the next episode. Bye!